Hey everybody, hope you're having a good evening this evening. It's a beautiful evening. It got a little chilly where I am early on, but see it's down, in my area it's down to 57 degrees. It was a cool day. It's probably about mid 70s at the peak, but yeah, it was a nice evening. I got out to my local pub this evening and had some good conversations with some folks there. Still using this new equipment. Got a new little sort of logo, if you saw there in the intro. Trying to sort of figure out where I want to go with the name of the channel and the topic and so on and so forth. So I renamed it from just my name to DC Entropy. Entropy is sort of, I guess it's sort of multiple meanings depending on what you're talking about. But let me pull up the official and close down these tabs here. And got my little chaos fractal. Love fractals. It's all mathematics, but so random and chaotic. Let's see, entropy. New definition. I guess that's sort of science for a closed thermodynamic system and quantitative measure of the amount of thermal energy not available to do work. I guess where it fits in a bit for me is definition number 2, a measure of the disorder or randomness in a closed system, or the measure of the loss of information in a transmitted message. I'm hoping that's not the case, but in a way, you sort of start with topics and then you just sort of fizzle out and fade out. So I guess it's sort of entropic, the way some people in this particular format tend to go. You just sort of talk until you don't have anything else to say, and it goes from a very focused conversation on a specific topic to a measure of the loss of information in a transmitted message. But like I said, I was out at a local pub today. The people I tend to run into, a lot of them are people I know, with some regulars, some I hadn't seen in a while. One in particular, one girl I hadn't seen in a while. Got to catch up a little bit with her. That was nice. And talked with a few others. With a group talk, we were, I'm not going to name any names or say where I was. I mean, a lot of people from Somerset might know where I'm talking about, but I don't think anybody from Somerset really watches me. I did give a link to somebody, so if you watch this, and shout out to you for for watching my channel here. I just sent it to you a few minutes ago, so maybe you'll be the first live person that pops on here, since I am streaming. You know who I'm talking about. I'll just say initials, NL. So, but yeah, we had an interesting conversation on just like the male female dating dynamic, and I'm a little bit older, but they were specifically sort of talking about the dynamic in the mid 20s to mid 30 area in today's day and age, and how things are just so much more complicated than they used to be. And I know you always say, you always hear the bar is not the best place to pick up somebody who you plan to be with for a while. That's pretty obvious, pretty clear. And hold on, I'm gonna pack my smokes. Let me pull up a guy that I like on some of these topics. I'll play that for a minute while this guy here, Better Bachelor. He's sort of an interesting fella. But he talks a lot about just like relationships. Men wake up, they don't want love, just money. I mean, he's a little bit cynical, I will say. He's quite a bit cynical, but a lot of what he talks about is not everybody, and anybody who might hear this, it may not apply to you, but this is it is a generalization, and I don't like generalizing and stereotyping people or certain classes or certain types of people based on common conceptions that society, builds around them. But there's still a lot of truth to what he's saying. His things are pretty long. Let me just play a little bit of one.
Guys, welcome to Better Bachelor. My name is Joker with a face for radio and a voice for print. Today I got an interesting story. I'm going to do 2 videos today, The Tale of Two Men. So whether you're watching the Tom Brady one first and then you watch the one I'm going to do on Leonardo DiCaprio, or vice versa, if you're watching the Leo one, then come back and watch the Tom one, although that doesn't matter me saying that in this video because this wouldn't be the one you're watching. Anyway, Tom Brady. Basically, he's a model. He might even be classified as supermodel, but he's male. So I don't know if that counts or not. Supermodel, 6'4", worth, I don't know, millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. Father, devoted family man, superstar athlete, 6-pack. Everything that women say that they want today. And I did a quick review of this article that just came out on him, and turns out Gisele Bündchen is leaving him. Shocking. Who could have seen this happening? I'll jump right to the article here. Actually, before I jump into the article, who could have called this? Like, who could have seen this coming, that even if you're the perfect man, you got to change and you're not good enough? Let's see. Who could it be? She wasn't satisfied with our marriage, so I needed to make a change in that. Again, so, even if you're that sick.
So, yeah, I guess you can sort of see how I just had my channel pulled out, making sure I'm live. I guess not to get away from what he was getting into, but I've tried to do some live streams over the past couple of days, and they've always been very, very delayed. They don't seem to pop up on YouTube until I'm a half an hour in or almost done, or just after I hit the stop streaming button. But it's up now. It's live. So if you're in here, let me see if I can bring up the chat window. Docs. Let's see. Yeah, chat. I guess nobody's in the chat. Top chat, live chat, all messages. Okay. So I guess if somebody says anything, then I'll see them there. Let me test it on my own. Testing. It came up on my phone. Well, of course I sent it on my phone, but I don't see it on my app here. Maybe again, it's probably delayed somewhat. So yeah, I'm still learning this whole system. I showed some people. I got this mic, and then I have the Rodecaster Pro, not the new Rodecaster Pro 2, but the one that came out back in like 18. So I have that one. We've used it. Me and some friends have used it for a couple podcasts, but not a lot of them. So I'm still sort of learning the ropes. But like he was saying, I mean, you got a guy who, I mean, I'm sure they have personal issues that Gisele Bündchen, I'm sure they have personal dynamics that nobody knows about, just personal things. So maybe that's why she's leaving or whatever, maybe, or maybe not. I mean, who knows? But it just seems so impossible. There's so many unrealistic expectations of what people on both sides, male or female, need to be for people to be happy. And so often in relationships these days, people get into the initial attraction, do whatever they're going to do. Again, if it's in a bar, like I was talking about earlier, you might take somebody home or have a one night stand or just casual or whatever. But it's probably not the best place to look for somebody. Now, if you find a good connection there, then it might be a little bit different. I mean, I thought I did, but I didn't, and I'm not going to get into that. But I learned my lesson. I always told people at that place, like, do not date people who are friends of yours or whatever that you run into at your local pub or tavern or bar or whatever. Because if it doesn't work out, it's obviously going to become very awkward, especially if if that person was a part of like an entire circle of friends within the area. It's going to, you're probably going to have some bitter breakup, and then, people, you're going to have to take one side or the other, or other people are going to take one side or the other, and it gets complicated and it's just silly. And with mine, again, no details, I sort of got into it thinking that particular establishment was going to not exist after New Year's. So I sort of took that chance that it would work out with that person. Even if we broke up, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. And it wasn't ultimately. I mean, I've seen her around, but it is what it is. So I learned my lesson. That establishment's still there. They're still around and, thriving and so on. So, but a lot of my other friends didn't take that advice that I tried to offer. And me, I sort of have joked around with a number of my friends that I'm speaking of specifically on this topic, that I do my best to try to be Switzerland. I guess it's my own unofficial nickname for myself. I'm Switzerland. I'm neutral. I don't take sides. I'm friends with everybody there, or I try to be. Even when there's falling outs among different people, and sometimes from week to week or month to month, I don't even know who's good with who. So I sort of figure out what the dynamic is when I see them all there at the same time. They may not be sitting together or talking to each other, and I have to sort of make my rounds around all my different friend groups and say hi. Don't want to neglect any particular group or particular person. But that's almost more complicated than like a single relationship breakdown with one person. Trying to figure out who's in with who's not talking to who, and so on and so forth. It's impossible sometimes, but I do my best. As far as I know, I'm good with everybody that I call a friend. So, yeah. So that's that. And that guy's good. I mean, I think he's quite cynical, but again, he has experience. What he speaks is sort of pretty pertinent. In my area, I'm in a more of a rural place, so a lot of the women here, even though a lot of what he says applies, it doesn't as much. It's not as much ingrained in people around here than it is in the bigger cities. The bigger cities is where, this applies a lot more. But regardless, I've seen so many, again, I'm not like pointing directly at females or male, just on both sides, like I've seen so many women come in and just work their thing and just like take a guy, just take him home or whatever. And then same on the female side, somebody who I've, women that I know that I've talked to who just go for the lowest common denominator. No matter how nice of a guy, how good of a guy, they go for the lowest common denominator. I think that's just human nature, maybe, or confidence instinct. Goes back probably to primal levels. I'm not an expert on this stuff by any means. I was married for 12 and a half years, and good marriage, but it just didn't work out in the end. And I have no real negative things to say, but yeah, that was a good one here that came out a couple days ago about a woman. Let's see, journalist Nora Vincent's world was crushed when she learned nothing she knew about men was real. Here, let me click on. I'm not going to play it, but just read the description here. Nothing that she learned about men was real, and women had many of the flaws she thought men had. So again, it goes on both sides. You know, not only do you have men out there who are players and playing the game and doing what they're doing, women do the same thing. Everybody, you know. I mean, yeah, it and then this woman, let's see, she killed herself. Never recovering from what she learned from and about men. I mean, that's depressing in itself. I mean, it's a long podcast here, but let me just play a little bit and see if he gets to the heart of the issue.
Guys, welcome to Better Bachelor. My name is Joker with a face for radio and a voice for print. I'm going to jump right into it today. I find this a really interesting story, and
I like that. You have a face for radio and a voice for print. That's nice.
Now, quite a surprise. I did a video on this gal. Her name is Nora Vincent, and she trimmed her hair, dressed up like a man. I've got a video I'm going to show, so I'm not going to like bury the lead and talk for too long here, so long as YouTube lets me play the video at 1.5 times speed without trying to peg me. I may have to stop it a couple times or something, although I chopped it up pretty good.
Of course you do. That's YouTube for you. They don't want people to hear, you know, the truth from different perspectives, especially somebody who's like this female author who tried living like a man and everything. They don't want people to hear from that side. Just the popular sides, you know, of the equations of the alphabet soup, the LGBTQIATIAA++, whatever. They only want to, there's like one side that the media and the mainstream pushes, and they don't want to hear the repercussions of a lot of those people when they do things like this female author did. So let me continue.
Anyway, she tried living as a man for 18 months, and she found out that men are way different than what women have been told. I first came across this here, and this was, I think, on 9gag, where someone had pinned this article, quote, "Woman who pretended to be a man dies by assisted self-deletion after realizing how difficult it was to be one." It wasn't just that, but the 18 months that she did this spiraled her into a very dark place. She started going to hospitals to get help, and then she decided to write about all the bad things she was seeing in these mental hospitals, and that spun her all the way down. But the beginning of the decline was the work she did as a guy. I'm going to just play the video, and then if we get into the article, we get into the article. I forget, because I've had this 2 or 3 days ago, I edited this, but I feel, personally, it'd be very easy to roast somebody like that. You know, to say, oh, it's so tough living in a man. A woman couldn't handle it, and she took herself out. But the truth is that she did it because she didn't understand men. She was gay. She only dated other women. And so she didn't really have men either as partners, relationships, brothers, boyfriends, none of that. And she wanted to understand because obviously feminism tells women that men are a certain way, and without being a man, you'd never understood. So she jumped in to figure it out. So I'm going to play this video, and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
And I'm going to let the video continue to play. Again, I don't know if this is going to give me a strike or a stream delay or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead regardless. I'm not that big of a channel yet. So I'm going to go ahead and just, you know, try to be as uncensored and honest and open as I can be.
Let me turn the volume up on that just a little bit because I think it's just a hair low.
Safe, stay with the herd.
This wasn't just a stunt. This was about learning. This is a human project. It was about finding something out about the human creature, and I learned it the best possible way because I went through it.
What Nora went through, or more accurately, what she became in the last 2 years, was a man. She did it the old-fashioned way, with acting and a disguise. At 5'10", 155 pounds, and wearing men's size 11 shoes, Nora was a natural.
I think we can work with this.
Her transformation into the guy she calls Ned begins with a buzz cut, baggy men's clothes, and a too small sports bra to flatten her breasts. For the rest, she enlisted the help of makeup artist Ryan McWilliams. And so they came up with a method of shredding braided wool into whisker-sized bits and gluing it onto her.
By the way, he's playing this at a quicker speed to hopefully try to bypass any YouTube triggers or censorship.
Her face. And then there's the theatrical component.
So just easy Tarzan out on your chest a little. Good.
Juilliard voice teacher Kate Murray coached Nora for months on a program of movement, breathing, and speaking.
I want you to be the best man you can be.
All to incorporate some of the subtle and not so subtle characteristics of being a guy.
Notice what men do. If they need to suddenly grab a taxi, hey, they just do that. Whereas women will ask for a taxi instead of demand one.
I wanted to enter male spheres of interest and see how men are with each other. I wanted to make friends with men. I wanted to know how male friendships work from the inside out.
Ned's first...
Let me pause it here real quick. So this wasn't just... She did a really good job of coming across completely as a man, and all the men that they later interviewed when she kind of revealed, haha, I'm a lady, and they were all taken aback. And all of them said, oh, I really thought you were a guy. Now, again, they thought that it was a gay guy, but... Even knowing that, going back to 2003, which is not the Stone Age by any means, but 2003, you know, we keep hearing all the time that, oh, we need to change all these things, and these groups are isms and phobes and everything else. Even going to a blue-collar working class area, going on a bowling team, doing other things with just guys in almost, 20 years ago now, and she was completely accepted as a man. And that's really key. And that's really a big key part of this. It just shows you that men have a camaraderie with men. They're not nearly as judgmental, hateful, angry, anything else. And I would recommend, this is on ABC, so you can probably just search Nora Vincent living as a man and find the video. Because so many times people are like, dude, just shut up and let me watch the video. It's like, no, this is my channel. I'm going to talk and share my thoughts. But she was taken in as a guy. So he was taken in. And that's why I say so many times to men that are lonely or they feel sad or that a lot of times if you find the right group, whether it's bowling or fishing or motorcycle riding or archery or something, you can find a group of like-minded guys that will take you in. They're not going to be your best friend right away, but you spend time week after week in a darts league or bowling or shooting pool or something like that. You will find a camaraderie, and you will find guys that'll play poker with you or hang out. It takes time, and it does take some effort. I mean, look at the effort that she went through to kind of bleed in. It was 18 months. But the point is it can be done, and you'll most likely be accepted.
Act as a newly minted male was to join that quintessential bastion of camaraderie, a men's bowling team. The only problem was she's a terrible bowler.
And why didn't they just run you out of town when they saw how bad you were?
It's an amazing thing because I think that shows you the generosity that they had.
It was the first of Nora's many surprises. She thought these guys from a working-class Pennsylvania neighborhood would mock Ned's bowling and reject him as a guy. But from their first meeting, they accepted Ned.
The handshake was unbelievable. It blew me away the first time I shook hands with a guy, a strange guy. And I was amazed because you think of women, you know, we're so nice, we're so easy, men are so mean. Complete opposite. Hey, baby. And I felt...
Let me pause that right there. What did she say? You hear that women are nice and sweet and this and that men are the mean ones, but it's the complete opposite. It's actually guys that are non-judgmental. And you guys know this many times. Like if you've ever, I don't know, encountered somebody or you walk into a machine shop or a motorcycle shop and there's a guy you regularly chat with over something. Like I used to have a motorcycle shop I'd go to that was my regular place where if I needed a new pair of gloves or new jacket or whatever, maybe a new lens for my helmet, I'd walk in. The guy remembered my name. And yes, these are salespeople, but I wasn't buying but $30 and $50 items. And nice, strong handshake. We'd chat. He'd invite me. They'd say, oh, we're having a barbecue this weekend. It's to show off the new line of bikes. I know you just bought a new bike, you know, last year or whatever, and you're not in the market for another one, but come by, free food, we'll hang out, listen to music. Those are the kind of things that make you feel like you have a community. And so many times, as she says in her own words, we're told that women's communities and women's are the sweet ones and the kind ones, when it's oftentimes, as she says, the exact opposite. It's actually men that are not judgmental. Women will oftentimes be like, oh, you're so sweet. And the minute that woman walks away, they go, did you see what that girl was wearing? Or can you believe that she does? Or I heard, and they go right into that. Guys don't care about that stuff. That's why men can go years without talking to each other, and they see each other and it's like 5 minutes past, because our lives are very simple and they're not, usually at least, judgmental. Now, maybe a lot of younger people today are judgmental, because again, we are going back 20 years, and she's 53, so she's actually, 4 years older than I am. But she found that a shock, and I think that's very telling.
Guy. And I was amazed because you think of women, we're so nice, we're so easy, men are so mean. Complete opposite. Hey, baby. And I felt as comfortable as I could feel right away. They just took me in. No questions asked.
This is the first time the guys are coming face to face with the female version of Ned.
Would you have known me on the street?
No.
No? Good.
You're taller than I remember.
Yeah, I know. You're shorter. What happened?
Though they've known about Nora's true identity for months,
How are you? Congratulations.
this reunion is their first chance to talk about their friendship. The team had bowled together for 9 months, and gradually Nora gained entrance into the inner sanctum. She found that all the cussing and good-natured ribbing is just how men often show affection for each other.
Way to go, Ned.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my.
I'll pause it there again, because these are things that we talk about all the time. But here's how you know a man doesn't like you: when he's cordial and polite and he's just very nice and he's like, yeah, that's a guy that doesn't like you, or is at least being like, okay, I got it. Or they're very much a kind of a recluse. I'm kind of reclusive, so sometimes I definitely do the, hey, I don't say this, but I feel like this, or it's like, hey, nice to meet you, I'm totally uncomfortable, I got to go away now. That'll happen too. But when you find a group of friends that do like each other, they're not passing compliments. They're ribbing each other, they're giving a hard time. And if you've ever seen some of the British TV show, Top Gear, those guys, all they did is, and yes, some of it was for camera, but all they do is give each other hard time. If you see certain TV.
And I'm going to pause him even. I learned that back early in my career about how you know when people like you, like you said, or guys, like when it comes to a guy group. One of the places I worked at, Air Force Base, I knew I was sort of getting in with the guys when we started just ribbing each other, and it was sort of a diverse group. I'm, who I am, and then one of the other tech guys who was sort of my superior. He was a black guy, and then we had another guy who was like sort of Irish, yeah, very sort of Irishy, but that type of humor and that type of attitude. They were both very outspoken people, and I was sort of the quiet, shy one, but I knew I was sort of getting in with them when they just started ribbing me and stuff, and it took me a bit to get used to it, but it was all in good humor and good vibes. So, but I became very good friends with those people, and I'm still in contact with, a couple of them today. This was 20, 25 years later. That's how much of a bond that I built with these guys over a year or so, a year and a half that I worked with them. And the same goes all throughout my life, from even before that when I was in Boy Scouts, and I lived at a Boy Scout camp. A lot of the people that I associated with, you sort of knew that you were a part of the crowd when they could just be open and honest and talk about any topic and everything, and there was like nothing held back, and a lot of my intellectual pursuits when it came to computers, IT, science, just different topics that I'm interested in. A lot of those people were sort of my early mentors in those areas, and so and I just had a conversation a couple weeks ago with probably one of the first people in my life who got me interested in, for example, ancient history and stuff. He was an archaeology type guy. Still friends with him on Facebook. I haven't seen him, not as long as some of these people, but I haven't seen him in a number of years. The last time we were together, we didn't really get to catch up as much as I would have liked to, but on Facebook we did, and talked about a lot of topics in just the past and caught up, you know. So the camaraderie that's built, at least from my perspective on a man's side, it's sort of it's eternal. As long as that person doesn't cross you or stab you in the back or whatever. But it lasts, and you can, even if you haven't seen or talked to that person in 10 or 15, 20 years, 25 years, you can pick up almost where you left off and just be back to where you were. And I'm not saying the same's not true on women's side when it comes to female camaraderie among themselves. You know, it might somewhat be the same, but that's just I'm just giving my perspective. So let me continue.
Shows, but they do portray it accurately where you're crapping on the person. There's some YouTube channels that I watch that they do live streams with sometimes 6 or 8 guys and even a couple of girls in there. The girls are always nice, and the guys usually are giving crap to each other because that's just how men are. But if you're on the outside and looking at these men, you might say, well, that guy's picking on that guy and that one's picking on that one, and it's a competition and it's all toxic and they all hate each other and it's all aggressive. Nah, that's how men show love. And again, she's finding this out because she was allowed on the inside without even knowing she was a girl.
And let me expand on that a little bit too, you know, because one of the a few of the guys that I'm friends with, you know, they're very much sort of the alpha type, and I'm very much sort of the quieter. I wouldn't say beta. I mean, if I need to be, I can be whatever I want to, but I just choose to be sort of the quieter, less outspoken person. Just so, you know, I don't like making scenes. You know, I have a little bit of anxiety, so I don't like to be like the center of attention. You know, if I'm lucky enough in an evening to make like one joke that everybody laughs at, then I'm good for the evening. But that's just who I am as a person. And I don't like the label, the alpha beta male or whatever. There's a lot of other ones that have come out over the years. I don't like those labels. You know, we're just all who we are. It doesn't really matter what label you come across as. So, but like I said, you know, a number of my friends are more of the alpha type, and I'm sort of the quiet type. But when me and those people, and same on the female side, you know, the alpha female and then the quieter ones and stuff. When I sit back with people on both sides, and have a conversation with them, you know, like an honest and open, deep conversation with them. I mean, they're just as vulnerable and just as, you know, uncertain about everything as everybody else is. They just publicly display and handle things in a different way. So let me continue.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot all about that.
Near the end of the team's run, Nora decided to reveal herself as a woman. Nervous about how they'd react, she tested the waters with the one guy she was closest to. She took Jim out for a drink.
So she sits you down, she's very serious, and she says, I'm going to tell you something that's going to blow your mind. And what did you say?
So the only thing that would blow my mind is if you told me that you were a girl and that she was a guy. And she goes, no, you're half right.
The she Jim's talking about is Nora's partner, Lisa, who the team had met several times. Jim assumed they were Ned and Lisa, a heterosexual couple.
But you didn't believe her at first.
At first, well, I was still in shock. I said, how can this possibly, you know, where would this come from? This is just a regular Monday night. I was out bowling, having a good time a few minutes ago. Now I'm trapped in this bizarre conversation about your name isn't Ned anymore, you know?
Later, Jim told the rest of the team, who all took it well.
What do you think Nora expected to find in a bowling alley full of guys?
I think she expected to find like a bunch of guys just talking about women's private parts and a bunch of racists. And, you know, I think kind of that's what she came into this thinking.
I mean, and I'll let her get her part out here in a second, but you hear what he knows how society views men. They thought we were going to be talking dirty jokes and talking about women's parts and talking about, you know, the isms and the phobes, as they like to say. And that's part of what she thought, because I think she expressed that to him at one point. But again, the truth is, it's good-natured ribbing. It's men, and men will share their problems. They share their issues. They share their highlights. But we're not emotional about it. It's just like, oh man, I'm stoked. I got a promotion today, and that's what a guy will say. And the other guy will be like, oh man, hey man, that's great. Good, glad to hear. How much they bump you up? $4,000, whatever. The difference, and men are done at that point because a man knows what the other man's thinking. Oh man, I can take care of my family better. It's easier on the bills. It's going to, I don't know, maybe I'll have a little extra fund money for something. Like, we're both guys, so we know that. We don't have to express this to each other, where women would say, oh, I'm going to go shopping for this, and it allows me to pay off this bill, and maybe I'll do this for little Timmy. And guys we don't talk about that because we know what it's like, because guys know what it's like to be a man. And even me, I mean, I was raised by my father. If somebody said, oh man, things have been tight recently, but I got a huge raise at work, I don't have to say, ooh, what are you going to do with the money? I don't have to ask that. We guys know, but women like that chitty chatty talk stuff. Guys just were like, yeah, man, I get it. And that's where and then they move on to other topics or more interesting things for them. Because for men, that's not interesting. The next guy might say, are you going to buy that chainsaw? And, oh, this one time I was up in the woods and cabin, and they get off on a bunch of different conversations. And that's why men oftentimes get bored talking to women when women want to talk about all the minutia, as we would call it. Anyway, here's her response to it.
They really showed me up as being the one who was really judgmental, because they were the ones who took me in, not knowing anything about me. They were the ones who made me their friend, and, no judgments attached.
Nora came to see that between...
And again, no judgments attached. Open arms, come on in. We're not judging you. But she knows women are like that.
Men, intimacy is sadly lacking.
There's a tremendous potential for tenderness between men, and I'm not sure that it's always realized, and it's terribly sad.
Cracking the mystery of a boys' night out is one thing, but what about the explicit world of a man's sexuality?
Okay, I'll jump into this segment in a second.
Yeah, I'm probably going to sort of I don't want to play this whole thing. I mean, I'm about 13 minutes in, but on that last topic where she was talking about, affection, within men groups and stuff. Honestly, like, at least where I am, I don't know. Well, let me preface this. Okay, so I used to work in Washington D.C. And in the city. This is back like both pre and just post 9/11, so it's about 22 years ago. We'd go out on occasion. We went out after work and bars and stuff, and in a city setting like that. At least for, in my experience, there wasn't really it was just very superficial, often among both men and women. I mean, if you got lucky and you could pick up the intern girl, the cute girl that's in college and interning, you might get lucky, but for that affection, But among men, it was just more superficial handshakes, fist bumps, whatever. But since I moved out of the cities and stuff and met, more, I guess, salt of the earth type people, or people who, like me, who had left the cities and came back to like rural, more rural parts, Kentucky here in my case. We remember those days and everything, but we're much more open, I guess. I mean, like, for example, when I like leave the bar, or when I get to the bar, it's always, handshake or a handshake, or, what they call it, bump, and then, you pull into a little short hug or whatever, a shoulder bump, with most of the guys and stuff. And then, when we leave, it might just be the same thing when we take off or whatever. And then when it comes to like male-female dynamic, and again, this is my area, my experience, but with the female, like, and all the guys, even the alphas, the betas, whatever you want to label somebody, which I don't subscribe to that, but whatever you want to label somebody, it's the same thing. If you're part of that group, you are family, especially in the establishment that I frequent. You are family. It doesn't matter. So like tonight when I left, I sort of made my rounds. You make your rounds to say goodbye to people for the evening. You might see them again later that week or whatever. It's not like a long term like goodbye. I'm not like leaving town and not coming back for a month or two. But for me at least, and I know this is true for a number of other people who may eventually come across this, because I've told a few of them about my podcasting here. or video blogging, whatever you want to call it. It's much the same for them when they decide, okay, it's time for me to leave. They make their rounds, and everybody gets the same attention. It's a hug, or a good handshake, a hug, or whatever. I mean, you sort of take 10 seconds with each one. Hey, I'll get a hold of you later this week. Let's go have some wings on Wednesday or whatever. Or let's with a female friend of mine tonight. I was like, it's good seeing you. I haven't seen you in a while. Before I left, we got to catch up on things. It was good. But I sort of made sure to sort of make my rounds around, and they do the same. So, but I never saw that in the big cities that I worked in, and even though I'd known some of those people and we were involved, we saw each other every day at work. We became really good friends, and in the bigger cities, you just didn't have that same level of general friendship, affection that you would have like in a rural area. So that's why I'm super glad that I moved out to a rural area, because people were just genuinely more authentic. So let me play a little bit more of this. I that's all I got to say on that point. So maybe I'll come up with some other ones here as he goes on.
Because I just want to touch on what she just said, because I'll forget by the end of the video, is that men do have tenderness, and men do have love, and men do care. And men do care about their friends, they care about their family, they care about their loved ones, but it's in a different way. She uses the word tenderness because that's a word that a woman would use. She'd say they're very tender. But what it really is, the correct word I think she's looking for, is compassion. There's reason why men will dive into a raging river to save.
Exactly. What he's saying now is sort of exactly what I was just saying. So,
a woman and her dog, even though he doesn't know the woman, he doesn't know the dog, and he's risking his own life for complete strangers. Why do men do that? Because men are compassionate. Men care. Men genuinely care. I think men care about their fellow human being and about making sure people are safe and making sure the world is doing well, because it's in their DNA. Now, we'll find out, because this next generation of young people are not being raised with that. And maybe it's not in their DNA. Maybe this is something that is passed on from father to son, from a good father to a good son. And maybe by clipping that off in a generation and squashing it, you're going to find a lot of young men do not have that. Because now if you look at people on trains that are getting mugged or hurt or harmed or whatever, a lot of guys say they have the initial impulse to jump in, but then they say, nah, I might get hurt. No, I might get accused of something. And of course, I have no faults with that, because I do stories all the time on how men get accused of things that they didn't do. So there's still that impulse. It can actually be very hard or painful for a man to not do something, even though he might be putting himself in harm, or he sees somebody else that's a complete stranger getting hurt. Women, I don't think, have that.
Yeah, that says a lot too. And again, that's in a lot of that case he just laid out. That's more of in a bigger city. For example, I don't think he directly said it, but there's cases where, like, women, and I don't want to get too explicit again. I don't want to get a YouTube block or strike or whatever, where a woman was being assaulted in in the way that men typically assault women badly, in a subway train, and people just watched. They just watched. A few of them just pulled out their camera, didn't do anything to stop and intervene what was going on, and you hear more and more of that going on in this day and age, because people are afraid they're going to be charged with something. Like if you were to kick that person off, then they're going to come back and sue you for assault, and most with the way the justice system has been working across America, a lot of the criminals they get off easy. They might their charges might even be dismissed, but if you're like a law-abiding citizen and you intervene, you get like even if it's like the perpetrator who files charges against you, you're most likely going to face charges, with the DAs and stuff, especially in the, again, I'm not getting into politics, but in the more, in the bigger cities, those particular type of DAs that are more lenient with the criminal element, but not so much with the law-abiding element. Everything sort of, in that way, everything's sort of upside down. It's yeah, crazy. I'm gonna run in and get another drink. I'm gonna let this play. I'll be right back.
Same level of compassion. They'll have compassion maybe for children and kitties and puppies. I think men have that compassion for everything, and I think that's a big difference. And no matter how much women try to emulate men, they will never have that. I just don't think they can.
I really ran smack up against the difference between male and female sexuality is that female sexuality is mental. It's up here. And male sexuality is a bodily function. It's a necessity.
Over the 18 months of venturing out in the world as a man, Nora Vincent guesses she put on Ned's whiskers and clothes about 150 times. After the bowling league, she was ready for love and sex.
Well, at first I thought, this is sort of the quintessential guy thing to do, right? The bachelor party at the strip club. When I told people initially that I was doing this, they'd say, oh, you gotta go to a strip club.
She says the clubs were obviously sexual, but once again lacking in intimacy, which leaves men emotionally frustrated.
I saw the men there. I saw the looks on their faces. I saw them sitting alone, nursing their bourbon, and this is not about appreciation of women, of course. It's not about appreciation of their own sexuality. It's about an urge, and that's not always that pleasurable, really.
These guys who go to these high-priced clubs would say this isn't about pain, it's about pleasure.
Men have had the tears and the emotional expression sort of pounded out of them from an early age, and so by the time they're men, they don't even have the vocabulary anymore or the emotional awareness to really say what they're feeling.
See, and this is where I disagree a little bit. What she says is correct, but I don't think it's been pounded out of us. Or if it has, maybe, I don't know if pounded is the right word. I think what happens is that men quickly learn the realities of the world. And I think they'll probably, I know a lot of, even when I was in high school, there were some really dark days, weeks, months, where you're like, oh, I'm an outsider, nobody likes me, I'm short, I wasn't bald back then. But you say, I'm bald, or I'm short, I don't fit in with everybody, I get teased all the time because I'm skinny. And that starts thickening up your skin, because otherwise you're going to be an absolute wreck. You're just going to be crying, like as a young man crying all the time. That's not going to work out well for you, because it makes you weird and emotional. And yeah, they call them emo kids back in our day, but the emo kids were the weird ones. They were the ones that couldn't handle, like their skin never thickened up very well, and they weren't able.
And I'll have to say, at some point, I was probably somewhat of an emo kid. As a young man, I had two parents, and my dad was, he worked a lot. He was around. Good guy. Again, I talked about that in the previous podcast, but I got a lot from my mom. She was a bit of a tougher skinned person, so I probably got a bit of mine from her. Yeah, so. And then just later on in life, like I said, when I started getting into Boy Scouts, that toughened me up a bit when it came to, again, camaraderie and being around other guys, especially Scouts or whatever that were older than me, who were, like I might have been like 13, 14, and some of them were like high school, 17, 18-year-olds or early adult Scout leaders who, in a nice way, they, were maybe not so nice, but in their own way, they were doing their best to sort of prepare us younger guys for what was coming in life. Again, I'm still friends with a lot of these people on Facebook and everything over the years, especially, some of them at my own age level, and then a number of the ones that were at my older brother's age level and beyond. The things that the lessons that I learned and the things that I took from being around those guys as a teenager did harden up my skin to what was coming in the world. Of course, I still had my own internal, battle and struggle that that I fought over the years, but I thought of, the lessons that I'd learned from them. And then, they were heading into adulthood while I was still in my teens. So I saw them being successful and getting good jobs with big companies, and a couple of them went on to like pharmaceuticals and just, again, working for large corporations and everything. So that inspired me, and then I got into the internet and helped start a company, an early internet company, up in Dayton, in the Dayton, Cincinnati, Ohio area. And again, that was a whole nother group of guys, and some of them were not quite as again, I hate labels, but they weren't quite as alpha as the Boy Scouts that I was involved in, but they were still strong people, strong and inspiring people. They challenged my intellect and my knowledge to do more, to be more. And that made all the difference. And, that lasted for a couple of years. And I got into the government work that I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, with the fellows out at the Air Force Base. It's a progression. It starts young. You got to prepare men and women. And this everything I'm saying here on my side, from the man side, it applies to the female side as well. Strong women need to inspire and encourage young women to be better, to do better, and I'm not saying through Girl Scouts or, because of my Boy Scout, mentions, but just being good people, good, moral, solid people. It's hard to explain from both sides because I only really have one perspective, but that needs to happen more these days, and it's not. The more and more disconnected that parents get from their children these days, the more and more those children are going to be influenced by outside parties, by people who may not agree with your ideology or the ideology that you've tried to raise your children with. They get indoctrinated into different things, and I'm so avoiding trying to bring politics into it, but again, it goes both ways. So if you're for example, if you're a more conservative parent, like in the rural areas, you worry about your kids going off to college and being indoctrinated by the liberals, But on the other side, if you're a liberal parent or, a liberal couple whose child lives in a rural area, for example, say like a doctor, for example, that lives in a rural area and they're more liberal and open, quote unquote, open-minded person, they may worry about their child being indoctrinated into a more conservative lifestyle. So it goes both ways, but in the end, there needs to be some balance, and then there needs to be some sanity brought to situations to where people can talk. And that was one sort of takeaway I took from the table that I was sitting at tonight. And most people, I think, at that table were relatively conservative. There was a little bit more of a liberal individual there, but she's awesome though. But one of the girls at the table mentioned, it's good when we were talking about the male-female dynamic when it came to dating and socialization between the opposite sexes. She's like, I'm glad we had this conversation. People need to have this conversation more, because they don't know it. They don't know what men are thinking. The women don't know what the men are thinking. The men don't necessarily know what the women are truly thinking. And when we were able to sit down and have these conversations and stuff, it brought like a whole nother level of understanding to the dynamic that we're probably going to have there from this point forward. So yeah, it was enlightening, and that's why I'm here talking about it right now. So let me play a bit more and see where he goes.
To handle things that were thrown at them. But the ribbing by other guys and being made fun of by your friends and other guys telling you like, oh man, don't worry about them. They're just giving you, you kind of have this camaraderie that you don't have otherwise. And even in school, at least in my day, your skin started to thicken up. And by the time you become a young man and then eventually, a little bit older man and you have a family, not many things bother you as much. And what a lot of women assume bothers men doesn't bother them. We've all crashed and burned trying to talk to women, so we're not necessarily shy, or at least a lot of us aren't. A lot of us have had struggles where we maybe got made fun of in school. So, and that thickening of the skin eventually, yeah, it does deaden your emotions. But when you do feel emotions, it can be even hyper-focused. It can be extremely strong. It can be almost dangerously strong, because, again, it's not that men are suppressing it. It's that it takes a lot more for it to express itself. And when it finally does, a lot of men maybe kind of pull in some other things that were bothering them and channeling it all at once. I mean, it's just like in communities like this, when we talk about the red pill rage, it's kind of like when you realize no woman's going to love you like your mother loved you, and that you always are going to have to bring something to the table, and the world's not fair, and your promise of the house on the hill and the family and the dog.
Yeah, he's getting into, like, again, more conservative and traditional expectations of a man, like that you got to provide. And I think throughout my life experience so far, I sort of followed that guidance, I guess. Through high school, grew up, probably around 18, 19, I started dating my now ex-wife. And then, she's getting out of high school and getting ready to head on to college. And, again, I don't want to get into like specifics of my life necessarily, just generalities, but she went on to college, and then I got a good job at that Air Force base and with a government contractor, and so when it came time for me to leave, I asked her, we had been dating for a couple of years, and I asked her to marry me, and I sensed hesitation, but things, history happened. So she was already like a year into high school while we were dating or whatever. While we were dating. And then we moved off, when I moved to Northern Virginia, I lived there for a number of months and then came back to our hometown. We got married, and then immediately after that, it was during the summer in July, she moved and with me back to Virginia, back to where I was staying. I had a roommate, and we stayed there for a bit, and then ended up getting our own townhouse in Virginia. But I try, basically my whole point in talking about this is I tried to do things in the traditional method. You date somebody, you court them, you get a good job, you establish yourself, you ask them to marry you, you get married, you get, move in together and get a house and have kids, and which we did, not in Virginia, but once we moved back here to the rural parts here, had kids. I have two daughters now, 17 and 14. Try to do everything in sort of a traditional way, and I still think, regardless of my marital situation not working out ultimately, I still think that was the best path that I could have gone. The best path overall that I could have gone. So, I'm not working in corporate America anymore. I'm a freelance technology guy. Not making anywhere near the money that I used to, but I think if I would have continued in the corporate world, I don't think I would be alive right now. I think just stress and anxiety would have eaten me up, over time. And even, it started to, even back when I was still with her. It started just becoming overwhelming, the stress and the anxiety. I started getting some autoimmune type conditions, in my gums and in my hands. There was I won't get into that, but there was just signs that things were too difficult. And then toward the end of that job that I worked before I got laid off, and then our separation happened, not because of the layoff, but we had other personal issues. So I'm not going to, again, get into detail, but I asked my bosses at that job, can I work from home a number of days? And this is sort of when I just got into like autoimmune things and anxiety and stress. I was so used to it for so long in my life that I didn't realize that those could become health factors. So when I started working from home for a couple days a week, I had to still come in for like staff meetings and if there was anything that needed to be done on site. But most of the time I was working from home. I was doing okay. Everything was sort of fine. And but all those issues that I had, it was with my gums. Like when I would eat, I get like bubbles, like almost like blisters on my gums, and then some on my hands. Those went away. I mean, it got so serious with this autoimmune stuff that my dentist thought that I had like oral cancer. They sent off like a sample of the tissue to make sure it wasn't like cancer of some kind, oral cancer, because I'm a smoker and a drinker. So that's how bad it got during that time for me. And then, and ever since then, now that I've gotten out of corporate America, and that's probably the only reason I really do my best to stay somewhat outside of like the traditional corporate structure where you go in every day and 9 to 5. I don't mind working remotely. Remotely is fine because I have a very good, sort of remote work ethic. I actually probably work more remotely than I would if I actually had to go into an office. Because I remember the worst thing for me was like working physically at a 9 to 5 all day and then having to come home and work more because it's like two separate modes. You're physically there and then you have to continue working into the evening. But when it comes to like totally virtual work, man, I can go like 12 hours, 15 hours. I remember a freelance thing that I had back in the day that there was a massive like hack on GoDaddy where two of my dedicated servers got hacked into, not because of my security, but through a back end vulnerability on the GoDaddy side. I had to stay up to recover all the data from my two servers. And thank God I was like remote desktoped into them like persistently, like constantly, because I was able to, when I started seeing things go downhill and the website started shutting down and the email services started shutting down, I was able to like zip up and compress all of the websites, all of the databases, all of the email stores and get them moved off of that server. It took 36 hours to do all that. But the second that I disconnected my remote desktop connection that I had been connected to persistently for many months, the second that I disconnected from those servers, I was never able to get back into them again. And even though I was working a full-time 9 to 5, that side work that I just mentioned, the websites and the email for some large clients, was still a big part of my income. And But the second I disconnected, those were gone. But I was able to get all the data and quickly move it over seamlessly over to new services. This is probably this is probably 2009. This is when I got into like virtual private servers, VPSs. It was Slicehost, Rackspace, and then eventually Linode, where I'm still on Linode now. I have like maybe eight servers on Linode that I host websites for, or websites on those servers. Anywhere from 20 websites on a server up to like 80 or 90, depending on how much memory and stuff it has, memory and storage. So yeah, it was I forget how I got into it. Okay, I think I got into that, talking about like traditional structures of how relationships and life should happen. So let me play a little bit more here and stop talking.
In the white picket fence, that may or may not happen for you. Odds are actually against you, or she took you for every dime and you're starting over. That rage is a horrible thing because it's really your entire life.
And no, in my case, we never truly had the white picket fence. I mean, we had a nice house and actually a really nice place here for Kentucky. But she didn't take me for everything I had. I mean, we were fortunately very amicable people. Our separation happened civilly, and I think probably the only reason that happened is because we had been together, not only because we had been together for so long, but because we worked at the same company for so long. So outside of our personal relationship, we had a very civil and logical, business relationship, if that's what you want to call it. So when it came to the end of our relationship, we did it in a very civil and amicable way, which, made things, of course it's not going to, on an emotional level, make things easier, but in retrospect and in a number of ways, it's going to make things less traumatic long term. You're not fighting court battles. I mean, I hear horror stories all the time from both sides, male, female, about, like their better half was well connected and they had attorneys and like everybody behind them. And it took like 3 or 4 or 5 years in custody battles and all that stuff. Now, we didn't do any of that. So I was very fortunate in that respect. And I thank her.
In your whole belief system coming crashing down. But upon the rebuild, upon the guys that can come out of this, revelation with a good mindset and a healthy, they've again thickened themselves up. But now they're not quite as weak to the same belief system because they know it doesn't exist. And so I think that's where maybe, again, she says it's been pounded out of them. I would say it's not been pounded out of them. It's just slowly been bled out of them. Just a drop at a time over the years slowly drains a man and his childhood emotions into being men's emotions. And men's emotions are different than children's and women's emotions. It's a completely different thing. And I've said multiple times, my father showed love, not with affection, not with tenderness, but his was educating and making sure that you were good and making sure no one had any stress. And he was very much I'm going to show you I love you by providing. That was his way. That kind of became my way because I am his son.
And that's a lot of, like I mentioned, it's not a public podcast, but it was one that I did. And then I decided probably because I had talked about too many specific people's names and specific situations I didn't necessarily want public at this time. But my dad probably did much of the same. I remember him being much of a, stronger person in my youth, trying to build me into what I needed to be. And then, just lessons and knowledge, building my intellect, getting me curious on different topics of where I could go in life, whether it was, computers. Computers was more of my uncle. He was my uncle. My dad's brother was more of the bigger influencer on the computer side, but my dad was still open to it. But my dad built a lot of intellectual, and he covered a lot of the bases. Everything from literature to science to politics. Even though we're sort of in the later stages here. Well, for me, it's more middle age, and then for him, more late stage of life. He's more liberal, more open-minded, not modern day liberal, but more of a traditional liberal, 60s, 70s liberal-minded person, which is honestly much more compassionate than the modern liberal. And then conservatively. I'm more of on the conservative side. I'm much more of a moderate conservative. If you go to like liberal strongholds, liberal cities, and ask what a conservative is, like me, if you ask what does a Kentucky conservative believe, you're going to get like a wide range, like racist, Ku Klux Klan, misogynist, chauvinistic, terrible, terrible person, who wants to take away rights from everybody and doesn't like gays and, or LGBT and stuff. But it's so much, it's so much the opposite of that. Not only with me, but with even the conservative Trump supporting, I shouldn't even have said that. That's probably going to get me banned alone. With that guy, I support him, and I still do. I mean, I think we need. I'm going off on a tangent, but everybody that I know conservatively, the conservative ones, support him and that side of things. But the mainstream media and everything has just distorted who the conservatives are so much that it's like impossible. It's impossible to get the liberals in the cities to think of us in any other way. They think we're just horrible, KKK, misogynistic, chauvinistic, homophobic, xenophobic people, and we're not. I mean, people who know me, I've told my story to. I grew up in like Cincinnati. I grew up around diversity and black and white and Asian and Hispanic. I grew up around all those people, and I never saw. And I know the liberals, a lot of the liberal people I know hate me saying this. I never saw the color. I never saw color. It's not important. And I know just by saying that, they call me like a racist or uninformed or white guilt or whatever. No, I just don't care about color. And then as things like progress through my life and everything, I got a lot of opportunity. Actually, my ROTC teacher in high school, he was one of the Muskogee Airmen. Old guy. He just passed away at, I think he was in his 80s. Within the past year or two. He was an original Muskogee Airman. He was in that group. He wasn't as old as some of them were. He was probably a younger member of that. But he was in the Air Force when I was in. He was a Chief Master Sergeant, Chief Shaw, black fella, great guy. He was probably one of the biggest influences in my life. I have a number of those, but I've been fortunate enough to have a number of those type of people. And believe it or not, all of them are either African or minority, Native American, indigenous. Those were the biggest influences I've had in my life. But regardless, they weren't liberal. They were conservative. By today's standards, if you want to go to mainstream media, they were the conservative ones. They're the ones who made me who I am. They're the ones who ignored things that they probably, that today people wouldn't be ignoring, but they chose to ignore that. They chose to do more and do better anyway. And they did. And they're great people. And they'll be, like my ROTC guy, for example, he's going to be remembered by thousands and thousands of students that went through his class or the ROTC course in Lebanon, Ohio, the Ohio 771st Chief Master Sergeant Shaw. Look him up. Chief Shaw. So he influenced a lot of people, and a lot of those people went on to great places. And then just, even though I couldn't get into military service, I still did civilian military contracting work and everything. And even those people at that level were still amazing. I worked directly with military and civilian. A lot of those people were inspirational. Chief Shaw. I never connected that. I guess two of the influences. I'm a little confused now. I guess two of my influences had the last name of Shaw. Chief. Maybe I'm getting the names wrong. If I did, then I apologize. I'm getting old. No, it was Shaw, I think, for my ROTC guy. Chief Shaw, Lebanon, Ohio, ROTC. Let's see here. Let's see, Chief. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Shaw, Chief Shaw. I'm not even going to, let's continue looking that up because it was Chief Shaw. And then the other guy was a guy named Fred Shaw, who was my pastor. I was a Methodist as a youth. He was a descendant of the Shawnee Nation remnant bands in Ohio. From my understanding, the Shawnee Nation remnant bands were the groups of indigenous that stayed behind during the Trail of Tears when they went to Oklahoma, that stayed behind and wherever they were and continued. So he was my Methodist minister, pastor. When I was a kid, he married me and my ex-wife, and he married, I think he married my younger brother and his wife too. So I can't remember. Again, I'm just like rambling. So, two Shaws. I mean, again, that's big because I'm a very big fan of for people who may be longtime subscribers because of my video that I posted on the Glory, Oh My Lord, the Afro-American spiritual song that I posted here many years ago. A lot of you are probably fans or subscribers of mine because of that. I only have like 260 or so, maybe more now if any of my friends from tonight subscribed. But so he was a big, in that video, you know, I mean, everybody, like a lot of people from my generation, you know, minus and after, watched the Glory movie with Colonel Shaw of the Massachusetts 54th Regiment, African American Regiment, and with Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington and all the greats. There's just, yeah, it was a great cast. Matthew Broderick was Colonel Shaw, or maybe he could be a general. I can't remember what he did before he ran into Fort Sumter and got kicked, you know, got shot and kicked into the hole just like everybody else, black and white, kicked into the hole, buried on, I think it was James Island, Folly Beach, South Carolina. And unbeknownst to me, when I went down to South Carolina, that's the beach that I often went to, was Folly Beach on James Island. So crazy world. So, yeah, hold on. I'm thinking I got some more brain stuff for James Shaw, ROTC, Lebanon, Ohio. James Robert Shaw. There he is. Okay, let me make sure am I on there? No, let me change my screen over here. Get off the Better Bachelor guy. I'm done with that for the night, that topic. Even though I love that guy. I mean, again, he's a little cynical. That was my ROTC instructor, James Robert Shaw. Obituary, Visitation Funeral. That was a couple years ago. Great guy. Chief, you can see the chevrons there. He was Chief Master Sergeant. And then Colonel Sears, I forget the guy just before him, Kowalski, something like that. But yeah, so I got so many stories on Chief Shaw here for me. And then Fred Shaw, the Methodist pastor that I mentioned, he's a relatively notable person as well. He, again, being like indigenous native. Nikkei. Fred Shaw, Reverend Fred Shaw, there we go. Native American storyteller and historian speaks. So I've known that man since I was probably 6 years old. We first started going to his Methodist church when it was at Kings Mills High School. It was in the auditorium. And then over time, I was probably 6 years old, 6 or 7. And then we got in when they were just in the phase of moving out of the high school and moving, and raising money and everything to build an actual church. And that was Deerfield United Methodist Church in Landon, Ohio, just outside of Mason, near Kings Island. So he was one of my early Boy Scout leaders. There's like a level for people who don't know. There's like you got the Cub Scouts and then the Boy Scouts, and then there's sort of a small intermediary level called the Webelos. Webelos, Webelos, where that's sort of transitioning you out of not only in uniform and rank, but sort of transitioning you out of the Cub Scouts into the actual Boy Scout unit. So he was my leader there. I remember going over to his house. We lived in a neighborhood across the street from him. He lived in another neighborhood across the street near the Landon Shopping Center, just, I guess, north of that. But, you know, with his, even in church before I was in Scouts, when I was a little kid, I mean, he would come in and tell, you know, the Shawnee stories, the lore and the beliefs of his peoples. And it was just fascinating to me. He did that like once or twice a year at church, like at the church. And then he also spoke out at different places, a lot of different places. Well, not only in my local area, but around the world. He got asked to speak at different events and different celebrations of indigenous, like, well, for Fort Ancient, for example, just outside of Cincinnati. So he was a big part of, again, shaping me into an understanding person, you know, and looking at all different sides of America and what America was and what it has become. So that was another Shaw. So there's James Shaw, Fred Shaw, Colonel Shaw from the Massachusetts 54th. I never made that connection until tonight. It's fascinating, but yeah. And then later on, like I said, when I worked for the Air Force Base, I mean, that guy, he wasn't a Shaw, but he was another major person. He's still I think, active in business. He might be retired now, so I'm not going to get into specific names. Initials MB, if you know your name. Well, you do, I'm sure. But you were a big influence on me, too, if you ever happen to run across this video cast. So, and he was a Jamaican, African-American Jamaican guy who was the first to give me my step into life, you know, into the corporate world, into things. He was a minority small business owner in Dayton, Ohio, and he gave me and many other people. I'm not the only one. He gave many people from many different ethnicities and backgrounds the chance to do better, and they all have. I mean, again, I still follow a lot of these people on Facebook and stuff. They're all very successful people. So I'm just tired of all the not going back to the beginning of this cast. Not only the male, female, you got the different races, you got all the different divisions that mainstreams tries to exploit to separate us. If you actually sat down, go through your own life, just like I've done tonight here, obviously, on my own thing here. If you sit down and go through all that, you're going to see that we're all the same people. And we've all influenced each other, whether positive or negative. We all have influenced each other. Some, in some cases, more positively than others. But for me, again, fortunately, I've had a very positive experience in my life with general diversity. So very lucky. Not so many people have that, but find it. If you don't have it, find it. Put yourself out there. Talk to people, meet people. Learn about those people. Tell them your side. Tell them your story. Build that camaraderie. Again, like I said earlier, not only in the earlier part with the male-female, but just people with races, with ethnicities. Talk to people. Stop ignoring them. If they believe something you don't, stop. Just stop the division that's trying to be created. So I guess I'm going to sort of leave it at that. I've sort of reached the end of what I'm going to say here. I got off that guy that got off the topic of the guy that was on here earlier. Went into a little bit of my own topics, but I think it's been a good one. It's very long now. It's about an hour and a half, so hope you listen to it and hope you enjoy it. Thank you. Good night and peace out.